It's hard for me to believe it, but tonight is our last night of content for this session of Hedgerow. So we've made it to the end of our syllabus. There will be one meeting next week. It's an optional meeting, and it's a chance for everybody who's participated in the class to do some sort of reflective presentation if you'd like. So in the past, people have done things like write a poem or bring in a poem that you've read that reminds you of how you're processing the material that we've talked about. Somebody baked some ancestral recipe. Some people have done needlepoint or paintings. So there's a lot of different things that you're would be totally welcome to contribute if you want. And you don't have to, of course, but if you have something that you'd like to share, think about it this week and then bring it with you next week. And everybody will have a chance to do that who wants to. So, and I won't be able to join you. I have 3 kids and every single one of them is playing in a band concert. Oh. For the first time. They're like in one concert together. So I got to be there. Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking about chapter 10 of our book. And it's going to be a little bit of a different evening. So I'm going to do just a general overview to start our class of the chapter, sort of talking a little bit about some of the basics that we read together. And then we have 2 guest presenters who are not guests because they're class participants. So we're going to have Bree Lloyd, who is joining us from Hawaii, and she's going to be speaking a little bit about some things that some parallels to the chapter content from where she's living in Hawaii. And then we're also going to hear from T, who is going to be speaking a little bit about things that she is experiencing or has read and probably experienced as well that also relate to the chapter content. And we'll have some time for discussion and processing together too. So with that, I will begin my portion. Okay. So hold on for 1 second. Sorry, folks. Okay. I'm pressing all the right buttons. It's taking me a minute. Okay. Can you see Zoom, folks? I've got to press buttons over here. Okay. So this chapter, the person who wrote this chapter, I think one of the things about this book that I wish were different is that all of these chapter authors are so fascinating. They're really interesting people. And all we really get about them is their name, right? We don't hear a lot about the chapter authors. And also a little note about that. Last week when Rhonda came to speak with us, you know, who was one of the chapter contributors, yeah, and she was amazing, right? But she said that what she's going to do is reach out to the other chapter authors because they have like a WhatsApp group or whatever, and let them know that we're doing this class so that they know that we're reading their book and we're sitting with their material. And I just kind of like the idea of them knowing that, you know?
Yes, very nice.
Yeah. So anyway, I did a little bit of research into Elizabeth Owenwa, who is the author of this week's chapter. She's 28 years old. Really extraordinarily, I think, thoughtful and wise woman. And she is originally from Nigeria, which is, you know, the area where this chapter, the characters in this chapter, especially Ken Saro-Wiwa, where this all unfolds. And but she immigrated to Prince Edward Island, which is where she lives now, and she's lived there for the past 8 years. And she went there for school, but she stayed. So she's got her master's degree. She's a journalist. She's also a published author. She's been the editor of her own volume of essays that also talks about her own story called EJ, An Immigrant's Voyage into Prince Edward Island Life. So that's a book that I'd kind of be interested to read. I don't know much about Prince Edward Island, but I bet that there's lots of Sisters of St. Joseph energy from Prince Edward Island, right?
Generations of them.
Yeah. So she has a lot to say about the immigrant experience in that part of Canada. And I think that could be really interesting. So, and if you Google her online, she has this whole video presentation about the experience of being both an immigrant and a Black person living in Prince Edward Island, what that's just like. Anyway, interesting woman. And I'd really like to know more about her. But it also sort of brought to life a little bit more of her family connections, because as she was raised in Nigeria, both of her parents lived through the Biafran War, the civil war in Nigeria that was really a huge, major event of the 20th century in the lives of people, not only in this whole region, and her parents both, especially her father's family, experienced major hardships, including near starvation during this war. So this has been a current throughout her whole childhood and adult life, as far as the political ramifications of a lot of the topics that came up in this chapter, like colonization and a lot of the injustices that go along with
the oil,
with big business, using the people of her country to make their money. So she writes about her green saint, who is Ken Saro-Wiwa, 1941 to 1995. And this is a person that I didn't have a lot of experience with in my life. I think the moment, the political moment in the mid 90s, it's something I was alive for, but it wasn't something that I remember a lot. Was it a big news item in the United States when these things were unfolding in Africa?
No, we hardly knew about Biafra, much less
Sure.
things. Yeah.
So in the room, people said that they hardly knew about Biafra, let alone, this experience.
I'd say it was maybe,
Hold on.
Okay. I'd say,
You got it.
like in the Washington Post, there'd be a couple paragraphs in a corner somewhere in the main section of the paper, but it didn't get any actual attention, no pictures, no individual stories. Just kind of this happened here.
So I know that we all had a chance to read this chapter, but just as a little bit of a recap, Ken Saro-Wiwa was an author, right, of both fiction and nonfiction. And I looked around the internet to learn more about his works, and he wrote like a ton. He was really a prolific author, poet, playwright, lots of prose and poetry. These are some like this first one with the picture of him on the cover is a posthumous collection of writings of his from prison. But then there's also A Forest of Flowers, which is where Elizabeth Awunya gets the title for her chapter, is a book of his as well. And then the Singing Anthill, Ogoni folktales. Those are folktales that he has sort of retold, the folktales of his indigenous people from southern Nigeria, which is this area that's being taken over and by the oil companies. So he writes a wide variety of different things that have made him a big character within the country of Nigeria, even before he has this experience of civil disobedience, and that leads to his death in the mid-90s. So he is part of the indigenous group called the Ogoni people. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And their homeland is in the Niger Delta area of Nigeria. So along with his fellow Ogoni, he founded a group called the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People, or MOSOP, MOSOP. And when I did some research into this, there were lots of people holding signs that said MOSOP, MOSOP, so it was a little bit like the maybe Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee or something of their country. And in 1995, he was killed along with 8 other MOSOP members for their activism against the environmental destruction that Shell, or at the time, Royal Dutch Shell, and the government's complicity in this destruction. So this was helpful to me. I needed to see where this was. So in the map to your right is where Nigeria is in the context of the African continent. And Nigeria, just this area of Nigeria that we're speaking about on the left is right here in the southern part of the country, as the Delta, kind of like the Mississippi Delta and the New Orleans area, right? Just spreads out across the southern part of the country. And Lagos, which is just, a couple inches by the map away, is one of the biggest countries in the world. Like, this is not some backwater. Nigeria is the most populated country in the whole African continent. But Nigeria in general has the most population of any African country. And then Lagos is one of the biggest cities in the world. It's the city itself is about the same size population-wise as New York City. So it's a really big, it's a metropolis, and the whole area has got a lot of people live there. So I don't know what you're picturing in your head when you're thinking of this area of Africa, but it's a very populated, and very this is a place where it affects a lot of people. So so I also heard, when I was reading this chapter, I felt some resonance with the week before when Rhonda was talking about the work of Laura Vicuna in Brazil and her work with the indigenous communities and the destruction of the Amazonian rainforest, right? Mm-hmm. So here you've got another person who is not tied to a religious group, in the same way that Laura Vicuna is, right? But a member of an indigenous community that is dealing with the environmental destruction of the places that he considers holy and his people consider holy, right? And standing up against these companies becomes a threat to his life. So, I feel like some of the things that Elizabeth Owunya points out in this chapter is, beginning with colonialism, of course. There's another parallel to so many other places around the world. The oppression of indigenous and local populations, environmental destruction, and then profit-seeking and extractive business interests in this area. So this particular blend, this particular set of ingredients appears in many different places all over the world, right? We heard a little bit about it last week in Brazil. Here we have Elizabeth Owunya sharing her story of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni people's fight against oil exploitation in Nigeria. And I think that if we probably, in our own reflections, have thought about this in relationship to some of the places that we consider to be important and holy to us, because this happens a lot, just about everywhere, right? So tonight, we're going to hear a little bit more of parallels of these stories from both Bree and Therese. And Bree, I wonder if you wouldn't mind beginning.
Sure. I was very excited to hear from Sister Joan last week, and because I love talking about this stuff. She called me on the phone. I didn't realize that the conversation meant that I would be teaching the class, but here we are. So I'm very glad to share. I love sharing about this. It's a particular interest to me. Well, could you show the first slide that I have, Andrea?
Yes. I'm trying to figure out if I can. I want to spotlight you and share the screen at the same time. Can I do
No
that?
worries. No need to spotlight me. That's okay.
Well, but if I don't, then when it's
Both
recorded,
of them show up there. Oh, there you go. Oh, there.
okay, I think I've got you spotlit now. Yes, I do. That'll just make sure when I have the recording of this, Bree, that it'll be your face and not
Okay,
a blank screen. So, okay, go ahead.
got it. Okay, well, so the sort of native system for agriculture here and for land division is called the Ahupua'a system. And it's essentially like, so this is Oahu, right? North of Oahu is, to give you a picture, north of Oahu is Kauai, right? It's Kauai, it's the northernmost, northwest, and then you kind of move down to Oahu. Below Oahu is Molokai. Below Molokai is Maui. Below Maui is Big Island. And then there's a few other smaller islands like Koholalve that was used for the bombing by the military. So Oahu is sort of the second most northern island. The Ahupua'a system was a way of dividing each island kind of like a pie. There's the land divisions called an Ahupua'a run from the mountains to the sea. So you get a land division that incorporates sort of this vast ecosystem that incorporates the waters that come from the mountains and that flow down the mountains. And then you get the people who fish down, and then they trade, right? The what's grown in the mountains, what's taken from the sea, all of that is incorporated into one ahupua'a. Pretty holistic system. Um, So in the mountains, towards the mountains, where it was a little more wet, there's lo'i patches. And lo'i or kalo is a sacred plant for Native Hawaiians. It's the starch. It's kind of like almost like a starchy, uh, it's a, like a root. It's a root that can be grown in water, but also in dry land. But it's their elder brother, and it's a really sacred plant. Requires for the wetland lo'i, it requires water. So you had the lo'i up in the mountains where the water was, and then it would flow down, and then you'd have the fish ponds down below. When the Europeans and Americans came over, right, they brought not only just Christianity, but Western values and ways of understanding land. And missionaries started to buy up land and tracts of land. And eventually, many of the missionaries actually started some of the sugar and uh, pineapple plantations here. And with the growth of the sugar and pineapple plantations, the water was diverted. Water was diverted from the lo'i patches to feed the sugar plantations and to feed the pineapple plantations. So there's been a long history since, so the overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom happened in the 20th, or sorry, the 19th century, 1893, I think is when, and it was really seedy how the American businessmen sort of were spying on Queen Liliuokalani. Um, there was just a lot of underhanded business dealings, and essentially she was dethroned and locked in her kingdom, and it's a real sadness for the Hawaiian people. She was locked in her castle, essentially held in prison. Um, so after that happened, there have been a lot of fights around water and around who gets water. And because it was diverted from a lot of the low-E patches that Native Hawaiians were still using even at that time to feed the sugar and pineapple plantations. So that brings us kind of to today. If you would switch the next slide, Andrea.
Yeah.
So this is on Maui, and it kind of explains what happened during the Lahaina. I don't remember the Lahaina fire that happened 3 years ago. Um, this is a direct result of the plantation agriculture. So you can see the historic sugarcane lands in 1937, historical pineapple lands in 1937, and they were still active. These lands were still active for sugar and pineapple until the 80s. We even still have some pineapple plantations today. I mean, they're smaller, a lot smaller, but you can see Lahaina. These are again the sugar. If you see on the westernmost part here, Lahaina's on the edge of this. This is the dry side of the island. And again, these sugar cane lands were operative probably until the 80s. And then they kind of went defunct because sugar became more profitable to make in places like Brazil and India. And so they kind of went defunct a little bit, but the land wasn't traded off. And so just native vegetation grew. Um, Nothing new agriculturally has happened in there. So all these native grasses just came in and kind of took over these lands. So that in August of, what was it? It would have been 2023, which is at the end of the dry season or in the middle of the dry season. The winds came right from the top of the mountain, um, just started blowing across these empty sugarcane lands, and blew a fire that ignited somewhere in there towards Lahaina. And afterwards, there was all sorts of blame about why wasn't water available for the firefighters, who was controlling the water, because again, the fight for water goes back so far from when these plantations began diverting water from the Apua'a system. So after Lahaina, everyone was pointing fingers about where was the water? Why wasn't the water available to put out these fires, and what caused it? And again, it's these fallow sugarcane lands that are just empty. Okay, so I am gonna show a video now of it's probably better to hear from somebody local, and he's an artist who lives in our community. He's kind of put together a little uh, animated thing about this, what I just shared, but from Kanaka or Native perspective. Um, and he's again in the Waianae. He's on Oahu is where his kalo farm is. And he's a close neighbor to, I don't know if you know, Sister Rosita also has a farm here that she started. They're neighboring farms, and they often do a lot of things together. So there is a CSJ connection to Eric Enos as well, and we'll see him in this video that Andrew's going to show next.
Water is our sacred source of life. Before the colonizers came to Hawaii, the Waianae Valley was fertile and brimming with water. Our people cultivated and cared for the land, and they grew taro to eat. But the colonizers diverted the water to feed their sugar plantations. Terrible droughts spread throughout the valley. Our foods couldn't grow or thrive. We forgot how to care for our land. We were taught to be ashamed of the culture of our ancestors, and growing up, I knew almost nothing about the taro. In the 1970s, I was teaching art to local youth and took my students to camp in the mountains behind the Waianae Valley. The dirt was dry and filled with trash. Further up the valley, we stumbled upon these terraces. Terrace after terrace after terrace. What were these? We sought out stories from our Hawaiian elders and our taro farmers. Sky Father Va'akea and Ho'uhokukalani wanted a child. Their first attempt was a stillborn. Ho'uhokukalani planted the fetus, and the root grew to become the taro plant. The next child was a fully formed human from which we Hawaiians descended. The taro plant is our eldest sibling. Colonialism didn't just tear us from the food of our ancestors, but from one of our most important cultural practices, taro farming. Bringing taro back to Waianae meant fighting for our water, our land, and our own way of life. We began digging above the terraces. We laid pipe after pipe, redirecting the water from the old abandoned plantation dams. The water flowed down the valley, filling the terraces once again. Without realizing it, we had become the older sibling, just as the taro plant is our older sibling. We were seeds for a new land and water movement. Here is the huli. This part is kept and replanted because, just as you are our next generation, huli is the next generation of taro. Here, planted there.
How sweet is that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So that gives a pretty good overview.
Yeah.
Yeah, sums it up pretty nicely. Waianae is located on Oahu. The Waianae Ahupua'a is where Eric Enos's it's called Ka'ala Farm is, and they've done a lot of work to restore the lo'i there, the lo'i patches or the kalo taro patches there. And the next Ahupua'a up is Makaha, which is where Ho'aina o Makaha is. Again, that's Sister Rosita's farm. But this is Ka'ala Farm. This is Eric Enos's lo'i patches, part of what he has done to restore the lo'i there. And that's what wetland lo'i looks like. I didn't really know how where to go from here, other than there are groups that are around all of the islands that are working to restore kind of the Ahupua'a system. And I don't know if total restoration will be possible, but the value system that comes along with recognizing the importance of each place in the Ahupua'a and its role in the whole ecosystem, whatever sacred value that is alive and well in the islands. And so I also gathered another video about a group on the other side of Oahu, the wet side, the windward side of Oahu, that are working to restore an ahupua'a. And it's Pai o Heia is a fish pond. It's one of the biggest fish ponds on our island, probably on the islands. 80 some acres that they are working on, and they are not just restoring the fish pond down below, but the lo'i patches or the taro patches up the mountain. And so I just thought it'd be hopeful, a story of hope, to share the work that they're doing towards restoration. And so this is the last video.
I see the work that's going on in Heia definitely as a model, an ideal model for other ahupua'a to follow.
We're looking at over 300 acres of wetland. About 100 to 200 acres of that 300 acres will be converted to farm taro. We are looking to get about 180 acres into cultivation in the long run. Yeah, we have 40 employees hired right now. The acreage and the programs that we're trying to build, we're looking to add another 40 more.
We've been here for 25 years. The fish pond is 88 acres. It's not a small little pond. It's not a cakey pond.
A lot of people here are pretty solid in our vision that Aina Momona will create the world we need to live in.
Our vision that we had was the kupuna's vision. It was implemented in 1928 aerial image of Lloyd. That sustained our people, that sustained the families.
150 years ago, we had the same population in this area of Kaneohe Bay. And in those days, the streams were clean, the reefs were full of fish, no such thing as an endangered species. These systems collectively supported the same population we have today. We did so without imports.
Because that is what we had in ancient times. The people of the ahupua'a were self-sustaining.
That's the only way that we can become self-sufficient. So what's happening here today on this Aina, we're planning for the generations. This is the dream of our kupuna.
There were enough kupuna that were in the 70s that had support from their kupuna to push.
That first generation of the Hawaiian Renaissance, their role and function was to protect places from destruction through development. And then incoming is the second generation, so it's like my generation. And the second generation, their role has been to restore these places that the first generation protected.
We're just part of a long timeline of warriors that have fought to protect this Aina.
And we're supposed to take care of it. And it's up to us to restore it. This generation is doing a darn good job putting it together. It's going to take time, and it's not going to finish in their generation. They're preparing it for the next generation. The fish pond is another thing that we fought for.
This pond was completely inundated with mangrove. It wasn't until we started to create these pukas in the mangrove forest and connecting those pukas that we started to see the wall exposed. And then over time, year by year, those pukas grew, and there became sections of wall that were free of mangrove, sections of wall that were fully restored. Then eventually, 25 years later, you have this.
Our impact is generational. People are constantly asking, like, oh, when are we gonna get the fish? Or how are we gonna contribute to, 2030, state, local food goals? Yeah, like, It's on our doorstep. These are dangers to our state, the fact that we're so food insecure. And lokoi'a do represent solutions to that. But again, it's the long game and it's the time factor. It took decades for these ponds to be degraded. And it's been decades that water has been taken out of our mountains from the windward side of Oahu and pushed over to the Honolulu side of the island. So it's not just, oh, you fix a pond and then it's going to be better. We all want to see lokoi'a production. We want that aina momona. And it's coming back slowly. It's just takes time.
This pond would not look the way it looks today without the help of hundreds of thousands of volunteers. Volunteers have helped us accomplish pretty much all of our goals.
Volunteers are that's the heavy machinery that we have on our site. The absolute labor powerhouse is all of our volunteers.
We definitely love our volunteers. And mahalo all of them for all of the contributions made here.
Been really fortunate and blessed to have a lot of different people come in and help us. It definitely starts with the kids, it starts with the schools, it starts with the university, it starts with the church groups, just having them come in and koku. You want to talk about the future, you want to talk about growing more taro farmers. It begins with the schools, it begins with the wahanas, it begins with the visits. Makana ka ike, right? Without that hana, there is no ike. And so the best way that we can get them to do that is to come and work, come and experience the land. Whether it's just for the punana del keiki, grab something that's umamau, right? You grab something green, just having them to start to experience land.
Now we all have kids. So what's really exciting right now is we're now kind of in the third generation of the Hawaiian Renaissance.
I look forward to seeing what my children will be doing and our children will be doing. They're amazing because of the experiences that they've been able to grow up with.
And it's super exciting to see, wow, what is this third generation going to do?
I'm so proud of what this next generation is doing.
I'm seeing and I'm hoping is that we have an ahupua'a that is vitally alive and flourishing and able to do much good, not just for the future, but for current generations. We want to connect people with opportunities to learn about their aina and to help to give back to the aina.
It's so important to put our people on these aina, on this aina and or other aina, so that they can interact with that, create that pilina with our aina.
We want these areas to be producing food, especially food. That was our main goal with the lo'ikalo. So that is what we hope for this area, and I feel confident it will occur.
And that's why projects like this are so important, because we're feeding the people again. Not only the ai that is kalo and ulu, we're feeding them the mo'olelo, we're feeding them the ike, we're feeding them the na'awao, the knowledge and the wisdom that they're going to need to help heal Hawaii. And through that, we're going to heal the world.
Interesting.
So that seemed to me a pretty good example of groups that are working together to restore an ahupua'a. Aina mamona is kind of the rich land or the fat land, the satisfied land, the full land. Mamona is like someone whose mamona is big, but in a full way, a satisfied way. So aina mamona, full, rich land. That's all I have.
Thank you, Bree.
Wow. That was great.
That
Thank
is
you,
so-
Bree.
Would you be willing to answer some questions if people have them?
Oh, absolutely.
Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask in the room or online?
May I? I just,
Yes, go ahead, Ann.
I was just wondering, it seems like it's like a culturally embraced, like that film was sponsored by the like a Hawaiian, like a governmental body or whatever. So it are the values, is there conflict within the Hawaiian society about this restoration and the pressures from, the original destroyers of that original health, the sugar and pineapple and other industrial interests. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, Hawaii is such a complicated place because there are so many groups that have been here that came for the to work on the plantations, the Native Hawaiians who were here first, and then the Americans and Europeans who came later. So it's such a cultural blend. Um, but I don't know exactly to answer your question. So the Office of Hawaiian Affairs is always putting these values forward, but they also have to work in the government, I mean, in government, so you have to speak a particular language. So do they always get communicated through OHA or the Office of Hawaiian Affairs? No, that's why these nonprofit groups are really taking the lead on um, things like that, because the Office of Hawaiian Affairs will push through some projects, but mostly it's been people on the ground who are doing the work. Does that answer your question?
Thanks. We've got a question in the room. Go ahead, Janet.
That plant, the taro plant, looks very similar to plants I've seen on the Mississippi. And I think it's the trumpeter swans. That's one of the reasons that they come this way for that particular plant. Do you know if it is the same plant at all?
I'm not a biologist, so I don't know if they're related. I couldn't tell you. I guess you'd have to see you'd have to have the scientific name to see the connections, but I don't know what they are.
They're the same. Yeah, well, it's just very interesting that it seems very similar to
ask her what she's doing with you.
I think they call it arrowroot plant. That's on the Mississippi.
Arrowroot.
Interesting.
Go ahead, John.
Bree,
It's on. It's just not quite very loud.
Oh, go ahead.
No.
This doesn't seem to work, I guess.
I was just gonna make a comment, Bree, that I got to think of my island, but we were there right after the Lahaina fires, like the fall after that, and we were coming as tourists for the very first time to the Hawaiian Islands, and we had to ask some questions about whether as tourists we were going to be helpful or harmful to that area. And they do depend on tourism for some of the income there. But when we were there, we saw the burnt lands, and one house would be completely burned and the next one would be left standing. But we went to restaurants that they were still serving bottled water because they weren't sure that the water source was uncontaminated at that time. So that's just a little side note. And then I'm curious what we would know taro as a food source. Do you know how they use it? The only one that I know is at Costco, I can get this bag of, they remind me of potato chips, but they're not potatoes. One of them is the taro plant, and then there's eggplant and some others. So I feel like I'm eating my vegetables, but that's all I know that taro is used for. Do you know of any other ways?
Yeah, right now they're trying to figure out many more ways to use it so that, yeah, taro chips are becoming a thing here. But traditionally, it's pounded into a really starchy paste, and it's usually eaten, with your fingers and fish. And then old school, like if you have, there's often a reference, oh, my auntie likes sour poi, like you let it ferment on the counter, and that's really a sign that you really know your poi, like you're really comfortable. Like an auntie who eats sour poi is somebody who's been eating it their whole life. So yeah, usually it's pounded into a really thick paste, and it's eaten alongside rice or fish.
Do you know what nutrients it's rich in?
I don't. It's purple. It's usually purple. Well, there's there's different varieties, but usually pounded poi is like purplish, but there's also a kind that's a little bit starchier, like yellowish white.
Thank you.
I just Googled, and arrowroot and taro are related. They both, and you can buy arrowroot flour. I guess I've seen it in the store. So it's kind of the starchy root. They both are valued for, there were pictures. It's like they call it a corn, but it's a big broadening of the root that they harvest and then use to make their grind into a paste of flour and then make paste or whatever. They're not botanically exactly the same, but they're cultivated for the same reasons.
How about that?
Interesting.
What are you up to with young people? Bree, are you still doing a garden with them?
We have a small garden on our property, but and we did have a few beds that were in a dryland callow. I don't think we have any callow right now, but with the young people, I have a few young people at my church. I wouldn't say I'm leading the way in any way. It's mostly just learning from them. So the teenagers in my faith community, are always teaching me about, they're beautiful dancers, hula, and hula has so much mo'olelo or story in it. And so my job, I feel like, is just to learn from them.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm thinking that when you were on the mainland, that for a while you were on a farm or doing something like that. And I'm wondering how you've gotten into that and then and now it's in Hawaii, how you got started there, or just anything personal about that.
So I worked on a number of farms through the Midwest. I worked on a vegetable farm in Hutchinson, Minnesota, Loon Organics, for a summer. I worked on a farm. It was almost like a L'Arche community. It was a farm with adults with developmental disabilities in Wisconsin, Osceola, Wisconsin, for a few years. That was also a dairy farm and a CSA. And then I worked on 2 alpaca farms in Indiana. One of them, actually, Sister Maureen Freeman was the executive director of White Violet Center in Indiana. So I was there for a few years as well. But I just have long had an interest in how food is so fun, and our relationship to the land is so fundamental to our spirits. I did a graduate degree at the University of Minnesota in feminist ethics and sustainable agriculture. And that's kind of where it started. It just seems really, food seems fundamental, and how we relate to the land seems fundamental to everything else. And then I met Jazzy, my spouse, in divinity school, and she, my thesis incorporated a conversation between native scientists, actually, and sustainable agriculture. So I had a little bit of that interest starting at my graduate degree at the University of Minnesota. And then when I met Jazzy, and she was from here, I ended up out here, but it just allowed me to continue this conversation of land, listening to native voices, and spirit, which are probably just my vocational conversation partners.
Kathy, do you have a question?
Oh, I didn't have a question. This is Kathy Stevens. I just found this information about taro. And it says taro is a healthy food, both in its starchy root and its leafy green parts, providing energy and a wide range of nutrients. Key health benefits include improved digestion, better blood sugar management, and heart health support due to its high fiber, resistant starch, and potassium content. Wow. It's also rich in vitamin C, A, and B complex, and minerals like manganese, calcium, and iron, though the root must be cooked thoroughly to eliminate irritating calcium oxalate crystals.
Wow. Okay, then.
Wow.
Thank you.
All good. Kathy, online, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Sorry I'm late, but Brianna, what years were you at the University of Minnesota getting your degree?
2000, I graduated in, it took me 5 years. It took me forever. T 2011, I think, is when I graduated. So I would have started in 2006 to 2011.
Okay. Okay. Did you work with that? There's that CSA farm out north of the cities. That a professor at the U owns? Did you ever work out there?
Oh, the Women's Environmental Institute?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I knew about it, and I've been out there a few times, but that wasn't the place. It was actually a neighboring farm in Osceola, called Community Homestead.
Okay.
Well, Bree, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah, this is amazing. And I also love, Bree, how what you had to say made the connections between, like, it's really sort of morally and ethically a big deal when these things happen around the world, and I care about them, but also, like, we're in a class that is thinking about spirituality and about faith, and so how are these things connected to our faith lives? What does this have to do with spirituality? And I think that when you're talking about, the spiritual significance, the sibling, the Hawaiian people are related to this land in a way, that's hard for me, in my Midwestern whiteness to really fully understand. But it's definitely a spiritual grounding, and I think that that's beautiful and important to the whole conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this opportunity. What a joy.
Bree, thank you. All right, and Therese, you're on.
I need a mic, yes.
Yeah, here, this one's for you.
Well, Bree, thanks so much. And if you want to come back to the mainland, we need you here. So I grew up in Small Town, Iowa. My dad and mom were both farm children. My dad's brother lived on their family farm with my two cousins, girl cousins my age, and my Sherlock grandparents. And my mom's brother lived on their family farm with a wife and 10 kids, two of whom were my age. So we visited those two families a lot. This is my farm experience. We played in the fields, we wandered around the barns, climbed up in the haymow, we drank from the well, we helped feed the animals, we watched milking, though we didn't milk. And then when I was 16, my older sister married a farmer, and that was even more fun. She embraced everything but the chickens. She was very stiff of chickens. Then I left Iowa for St. Kate's in a convent and only made short trips home. So it took me a long time to realize the changes that were happening, but not for Sonia Traum Ayers. This is Sonia's book.
Can you go like this? When you speak, could you speak into the microphone?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
This is Sonia's book about her family in Dodge County, Minnesota. Who knows where Dodge County is?
Austin.
Anywhere.
No, Austin is Mower County. But
Yeah,
Dodge is
just to the other side of Rochester. When you're going down 52, it's to your right. So it's between Rochester and Owatonna on Highway 14. You take that. So she was she left for college in 1977. Everything was good. She got married. She had kids. Then she went to law school in Milwaukee. Then they moved back here, she and her husband and the kids, and she started a law practice. And it was easier from here, of course, to get home, to go down 52 and over on 14 and find the family farm. So she got going home more. And she started to notice changes. Where were the animals? Where were the fences? And she gradually found out that Big Ag, you've heard about Big Oil with Nigeria, you know all about Big Farm, but also Big Ag. And Big Agriculture had come to Dodge County. And this is where CAFOs come in. Next slide. You got to know this name. This is what an concentrated animal feeding operation is. And depending on who you're feeding, chickens or pigs or cows or steers, any of that, they're different sizes, but they run around 1,000 animals in a small area. And the reason you have them there is to fatten them up for market. So instead of having your, farm where you had maybe 50 hogs, a couple cows and a couple steers that you kept maybe just for meat for the family and a lot of chickens. When you have a CAFO, and that's your business as a farmer, you're just in the business of fattening animals. So who needs fences? They're just in this thing. And who needs farm animals at all? Because that's not your business anymore. Your business is doing this for, guess who? The meat packers. The meat packers own these buildings. And there's a lot of them that thrive near Interstate 90 because it's such a good cross section to farm country. So Dodge County is just north of 90. So they would hire integrators to go around and ask farmers if they would want to have a sure income. Really tempting. Not to worry about the price of crops or the animals are going to be sick or not. All you need to do as a farmer is build a holding facility. And at that point, it was like 1,000 when they started this, 1,000 little piglets. And then use the feed the meat packer would provide for you to get the pigs to their right weight for slaughter. So the company would pay the farmer to start, say, $15,000 a year, which sounds like a lot of money, $9,000 a month. And all the family has to do is feed the hogs and monitor for illness, dispose of any hogs that die, and pay the mortgage on the building, the utilities. What else? The water. Hogs don't sweat, so you need to water them down so they don't get sick. And get rid of the manure. Well, that's the catch. Get rid of the manure. And pay the salaries for the immigrants you want to help. So you don't have to get rid of the manure. You have to hire somebody to do that. You don't have to. But when you want to. I mean, this is 1,000 little piggies, all shitting far more than people do. So it's a lot to get rid of. So the farmer loses out if the hogs die or if they weigh too little or too much when the meat packer's ready for them. Or if the plant shuts down for a while, like it did during COVID. So then you have them there and they're going to get far too big and they don't want big pigs. They want them a certain weight because everything is set up for that. Like the seats in theaters, most of them aren't set up for really large people. So they aren't set up for really large pigs. So that might be a hard time for you. You wouldn't get much of a profit that year. But the contract is always for 10 years and you're paying off the mortgage on the building that you built. That was part of the agreement. The company doesn't build the building for you. So you're really kind of stuck. So why not take more hogs? So they started out by saying, take 1,000 because that was what the regulators wanted them to have. In just 10 years, it became 4,500. So almost 5 times as much. 10 years later, 8,000.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know what it is now. My book was in 2024, so it could be a lot more by now. Anyway, the buildings, of course, are small. The conditions are terrible. The stench and the manure, taking the water from the streams and the aquifers, are putting manure into the streams and the aquifers. That was a big source of complaint for other people in the county. So what happens? Well, you have to take one. I don't want to give you the manure details, of course not, but they're in the book. But what happens is you sue, right? You sue the meat packer. And they won one of those where they sued someone who wanted to build a 3,000 cow dairy just north of this farm that her family lived on. And won that one. They were planning for 3,000 cows and a manure pit the size of 7 football fields.
Oh my gosh.
Now, I don't know if you've probably gone by some of these places. If you're driving along and all of a sudden you get a terrible whiff of something, you're near one of these barns. They're very small. They're not like real barns. They're maybe not much taller than this building. They often have a lot of ventilation coming out of the sides. So it's one way to kind of tell them too. But mostly you just smell them and then you know that's where you are. So when they had this suit, they had to get testimony from the local governments, and the big ag people packed those meetings, but they won the battle about the about the dairy. I'm not sure why they won that one, because they kept losing them all the time. If I had one of these barns on my property, I'm gonna say I have enough space for 2 or 3. And usually the township government would let you do that, because why? Because they're your neighbors, right? Nobody wants to make enemies, so it's easier to say yes than it is to say no almost all the time. So as 25 years ago, there were 24,000 of these buildings in Minnesota. And most of them in the area where it's easiest to have them, down by the big meat packing plants, and down where the land is pretty level and pretty easy to go on. And they made 49 million tons of manure, which is equivalent to 95 million people. You know, if you want to talk about how you're going to take care of that, you would have to have an ability to take care of 95 people flushing their toilets, you know. So that didn't happen, of course, and manure displacement running off into streams, lakes has been a big deal. Well, the reason they can do this is because we all eat so much meat now. People used to eat, I forget what the year was, 14 pounds of meat a year.
Yeah.
We now eat 247, the average person. So maybe it's just a hamburger every day, which add up to that much if you get a quarter pounder or something. But anyway, there's too much meat. And so the packing plants can get people to do this because they can get rid of it. Well, I know that's too much information for you. You don't need to know all that. You can just put the manure out of your mind. But the book gives you the human side too. This is like a story. Sonia has written like a story for us. When her dad died at age 90, the dad who'd had the 2 lawsuits, who'd opposed putting up more barns on a property that he already has 1 or 2, people who resented the trouble he had made about CAFOs spread manure in the fields by the funeral home.
Oh.
And at the cemetery, people couldn't get out of their cars because they had spread manure out there too. Because it was their land, they could do it. And the stench and the ammonia from the manure, people just had to sit inside and went back to the farm, I'm sure, for breakfast or whatever it was. Well, as of the writing, her brother is still on that farm in Dodge County, and the coalition of environmental groups that gathered to fight the Big Ag group are still around and just helped Becker County, which is way north by Detroit Lakes, resist the CAFOs that wanted to come in there, because they said, this is what's going to happen to your water. This is what's going to happen to your lakes and your tourists and your fisher people. So there's been a good outcome of it in the sense that they've gotten together. And she didn't know that would happen. She thought it was just their fight. But like people getting together to fix that down in Hawaii, it's the same thing. It's people with hearts to do something about a problem. And usually someone that really needs to do the work first. So I recommend Dodge County Inc. a lot. And Sonia concludes in her thing that we do not need to accept this corporate model. This is big business. This is profits for the bottom line, which isn't your bottom line. It's the meat packers' bottom line in this case, who are owned by the Chinese, the Brazilians, who knows who else, but they aren't bringing money into this country. They're taking money out because you sell to them because they offer a good price, right? So it's not about helping Iowa or Minnesota or anything else. But she thinks if we make decisions for the animals, who of course are miserable, for the land, which is being degraded, for the towns, which are empty because nobody lives on these farms anymore, for the community we can build when we have a common desire to build a community, that things can change. And I think that's what Bree told us too. Things can change if people can just decide together that they want them to change. So the outcomes for me was I seek vegetarian recipes, and Annie's already given me one. I'm also throwing away my little toy farm. Remember the little toy farm with the sheep and the pigs and the chickens? And there's always a horse and a couple cows, you know, and a nice farmer who's happy and a farmer's wife who's hanging out washed. I've thrown that away. I mean, in my mind, I threw it away a long time ago. But that's not farming anymore. That doesn't exist very much. So that broke my heart kind of to think that. And I'm also thinking of joining a group who are working on this. So I looked up a few. There's a Regenerative Agriculture Alliance. Oh, that sounded good. But their focus is on tree range poultry, not free range, free range. They just get in the woods and let the chickens wander around the woods. A lot of stuff to pick up there. And I don't know what they do about the eggs, but maybe they don't. Maybe they're just for meat. But anyway, that was one. The Land Stewardship Project, which was the one that helped Becker County fight CAFOs, is another. There's one called New Roots Institute, which is trying to teach young people about farming and how they could farm differently if they wanted to. They could get together on that. And my favorite is Farm Action, which really is led by farmers, so tries to be right on the line when these things start to happen. All right, well, farewell then to Dodge County. But if anybody wants it, it's right here. And on to next slide. Iowa, who the author calls the swine republic now, because the hog is so big. So this is a fellow who is got his PhD in analytical chemistry and had various jobs. One of them, Kathy Warnicki, is with the Waterworks in Des Moines. And one of them is Soybean Alliance. So he's had jobs both for the industry and science soybean groups and for the state in the Waterworks, and is now at the University of Iowa, where he feels he has the most freedom to say what he needs to say. So that's Chris Jones.
I gotta look him up.
Yeah, do. Well, I found about this book because I was in Iowa for a family reunion. And I told the wife of one of my cousins about Dodge County, and she said, you must read The Swine Republic. So, once that starts happening, one of you probably has a book you want me to read, so let me know. It's a good way to find out what to read next. Well, Chris loves Iowa. He's a native, but he sees that being top in almost everything agricultural comes at a cost. We're the top. Iowa's the top corn producer, the top hog producer, the top this, the top that.
Soybeans.
And what have we lost? Family farms, soil erosion, fresh air, and especially because he's a hydrologist, good water. So this book is a series of essays. It's not a story like Sonia's. It's a series of essays that remind me of Jim Klobuchar's writing. Remember, Klobuchar was always a real strong point of view, but it was easy to read and hard to forget. Well, what Chris's essays are all about water. So I thought, up here in the land of 10,000 lakes, we know how to keep water clean, right? Don't wash your hair in the lake. That was always a biggie. Be sure the septic system is working. Don't build within, 50 feet of the shoreline or 100. I'm not sure what that is. But our neighbors across the lake at Timberley, our lake place, forgot about fertilizer running off their property into the lake. So they got green lawns, and we got weeds. It was sand, and now it's just weeds. But we don't have to drink that water. In Iowa, they do. Most of their water is from wells that are part of everything that's going into the ground. And because Iowa has become a monoculture state, corn and soybeans, 2 crops only, the soil doesn't get a chance to replenish itself. So, hence, more chemical fertilizers, which supply the nitrogen the crops take out of the soil. And in the old days, alfalfa put it back in, or clover put it back in, or oats put it back in. But now it's only chemicals that put it back in. And anyway, who needs oats and alfalfa when you don't have animals? As she said, where are the animals? Well, where are the animals? In the concentrated agriculture feeding lots, not out in the grass, not out in the hillsides. It's rare now when you see cows. We saw some in Wisconsin because they're still the dairy state, right? But you never see them on the way down to Iowa. So in 1960, Iowa's only used 16 pounds of nitrogen fertilizer per acre, per corn acre, 16 pounds. So you could lift that. In 1968, only 8 years later, it was up to 122 pounds because it had gotten so much better. And as he always says, the bushel wins. No matter what you have, you can say it's better for the land to do this, but you get more bushels if you do that, the bushel wins. You can say that you're hurting the water by doing that, hurting the native water by doing that, but you get more bushels. The bushel wins. It's just how we have learned to be commercially responsible. Not to the land itself, but to ourselves, to be sure we have a cushion of money. So the excess of all that fertilizer, because you put on too much, that's the other thing. I was very big with money for farmers. We think of ourselves, right, as feeding the world. So we think that we should help the farmer do that. So a lot of things are more or less given to the farmer or sold at a very low price, which fertilizer is. So if you have more fertilizer, why not put it on and get more bushels? But this all goes into the ground and the tiles, because everything is tiled, down the hills into the creeks, out on the road, into the lower land, and into your wells, but most eventually draining into the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico, which has a dead zone where nothing can live because of the Midwest, because of what we're sending down in our tributaries to the Mississippi. So that's something I don't want to see, is the dead zone in the Mexico, in the Gulf of Mexico, or is it the Gulf of Texas? I think it's the Gulf of Texas.
For Gulf of America.
The other major pollutant of Iowa rivers and streams, of course, is the manure. Because who can get rid of enough manure from 4,500 hogs? You can. So, of course, there are laws about what you can do with it, what time of year you can, like you're not supposed to put it on top of the stove. But these laws have to be enforced and often are not. Just like those permissions for feedlots are not denied. The farmer has the right to do what they want with their land. That's a kind of an Iowa mantra. So we used to swim in a creek myself near a hog farm, but it was only 50 hogs. It wasn't even a hog farm. It was just a building that they had hogs in a regular farm. And my dad would often shake his head. He'd take us there and drop us off. He just thought it was kind of dumb to be something so close to hogs and cows and everything else. But my immunities are incredible. I mean, I never get sick because I just built up all this. But now they have to absorb too much. And so and it's not just that one guy's 2,500, it's the next guy's 2,500 and the next guy's 2,500. So it just never stops. I'm not sure we would have survived that, swimming in that kind of a creek.
Yeah.
So Chris's conclusion as the Iowa hydrologist is that only about 5% of Iowa's streams have water that's usable, unless you, of course, put it through the Des Moines Waterworks plant, which makes it so they can drink it in Des Moines. So I think the next one says something. What does it say? Oh, yes. You remember this from the 50s, get big or get out. This was Earl Butz, who was the Secretary of Agriculture. And his thing was, you do that. You set those barns up, you turn all your acres into corn, or get out. Go take a job somewhere else, because you can't be a good farmer unless you get big. Well, of course, what's happening now is people are trying to understand if that's true, or if they can do more like Bree was talking about. Recover some of the land, restore something. Angie Schreiber has a brother who tried to do that with one of his soybean fields, I think, wasn't it, Joe?
Yeah.
Or beets. I think it was soybeans, though. So he didn't do any fertilizers on it. He didn't do any weed killer or any kind of a bug killer or anything. So his next door neighbor got aphids, right, on his crop. And Angie's brother or nephew knew that he was going to come over. I mean, that's what they do. They eat up everything in that field. They're going to go to the next field. So he was ready to lose that crop. And the next morning he went out and the ladybugs had arrived and were eating the aphids.
Oh, thank goodness.
So who knew? Someone told the ladybugs there was a feast waiting for them. And so they saved his crop, which they wouldn't have had. He killed them all, so it's kind of a nice story, almost like a fairy tale. And the ladybugs come to your rescue. I don't know how much times that'll work for him. The next slide is Iowa. These are Iowa mantras. Mm-hmm. This is our mythology. Mm-hmm. And we don't realize that everything is together for the commodification of agriculture and the loss of diversity in the farming community. And it's a brave room move for an Iowan who takes issues with this mythology that farmers are the one who feed the world. Because no, they don't. They feed the big packing plants who sell it to whoever will buy it. This guy says probably no African has ever had an Iowa pork chop. No. You know, pork's an expensive mission. It's not going to go to Africa. They're not even going to go want it. But we're not feeding Africa. We're not feeding most of Latin America. We're probably feeding some of the Venezuelans or something if Trump wants us to. But other than that, we do not feed the world. Soybeans are simply a commodity that we sell. We learned that with all the tariffs. It doesn't have much to do with feeding people. It feeds animals, which eventually can feed people if they can afford them. And if it's good for them. If there's one thing we're learning, meat's not necessarily the best thing for us to eat. There are a lot of other options. I think we have obesity, who knows what other diseases. So his thing is, wouldn't we be better off using our land for other crops that are better for us? Wouldn't Iowans be better off? So this also made me ready to destroy my farm set, because it's the same thing as described up here. But he has three things he thinks Iowa can do to clean up its water. The first thing is he thinks there should be more regulation, more rules for farmers. Wow. How do you think that sits? But he claims that corn, soybean, and CAFO feeding operations are like a little triumvirate, and it's hard to break into them. You almost have to do all three or none at all. So he suspects if we regulated a little bit more, that they couldn't put all the waste into the water, or they couldn't farm right up to the highway, maybe things would be better. He also believes that we could diversify Iowa farming. Right now, it's getting bigger and bigger. There's not much room for a small farmer, and there's no room for a beginning small farmer. So all the farmers are old and white, and their kids can't afford to take on that business, because it will simply get out of hand for them. So diversify. And his third one, which I particularly liked, was get rid of ethanol. He says, who needs ethanol? Which is where I think about a half the corn crop goes to ethanol, which I was very pleased to do that, because that was sure money. But with electric cars, he thinks maybe this is going to go away. So that's his third one. None of these make this man popular, but he doesn't care. He just writes his essays. He has this job. He can do what he wants. But best of all, he leaves us with words from Howard Zinn. You know who Howard Zinn is? Yes. Oh, yes. Okay. Well, he's a big fan of Howard Zinn. He's loved him all his life. So he ends his book with this paragraph. Zinn says, to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If people have behaved magnificently, if we remember those times and places, and there are many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act. And at least the possibility of sending the spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents. And to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a small victory. So be defiant.
Nice.
Thank you, Therese. Before we take questions, I was thinking so much as you were talking about somebody else who's in the class tonight, which is Jennifer Tashney. And so I asked her while you were speaking if she wouldn't mind just giving a little reflection about what, just what are your thoughts, Jennifer, given your position as a person who's been working on integral ecology, sustainable agriculture, small organic farming for the better part of 25, 30 years now.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Therese. I think Joan may have mentioned this to you, Therese, but in bringing up Sonia and her work, it's just interesting to note for the community that back in 2016, we worked together with Sonia. Some of you may remember, we worked with Sonia and some professors from St. Kate's, including Colleen Carpenter and Jeff Johnson. And we hosted a three-part series on factory farming in Minnesota and the social justice, environmental, and animal welfare impacts. And so we did it for the first time in 2016. We hosted that event at St. Kate's, just as an awareness event. And we learned from hosting it the first time that it was a highly contentious conversation. And we ended up going out to Mankato, down to Mankato and Rochester to host those conversations as well, just to kind of open up the dialogue about what Sonia was learning and discovering. That was clearly before she wrote the book, but just she spoke from her experience. And then the theologian and the philosophy professors spoke about the environmental and social justice impacts. And then we had a pig farmer, a small family pig farmer, Chris Peterson, who talked about kind of some alternate models of agriculture. So it's just neat that you bring it up here, Therese, again, and just to know we've kind of had a history with Sonia and with this conversation. I think, I mean, as far as being a rebel or taking some kind of action or not, and not just falling into despair with like the information that comes from both of these books that you presented, Therese, I just think that the one hopeful area is through partnerships, because it's so hard to do these things alone. It's so hard to be a farmer alone. It's so hard to try to be a farmer that's growing in a sustainable way and also make a living and have health insurance. Like, it's so hard to do that. It's so hard to even just try to continue to keep a model going that is trying to like teach and learn together around sustainable growing methods, because it just takes so much labor and energy to sustain. But I think, like with our work here on this small little area in St. Paul, you know, we've been able to keep the community garden going for 21 years, and it's a small thing, but because of that, I think we've been able to build a lot of great relationships and connections. And right now, we're a part of a group in Minnesota called the Metro Food Justice Network, MFJN. And these are a number of small groups just like us, like the Sisters of St. Joseph Community Garden, but a lot of other nonprofits in the area like Urban Roots and Dream of Wild Health and Appetite for Change. These organizations are coming together under the umbrella of Metro Food Justice Network, and we're meeting twice a month, and we're like collaborating on writing grants together so we can share resources, and essentially we're trying to work together to model a healthier food system, because we know that none of us can make too much of a dent in being a model if we're so small and just doing our little part. But if we work together, we can have an impact. And so I encourage everyone to look up MFJN. You'll see all the different organizations that are a part of it. From the sisters' perspective, we have an action team called the Cross Campus Food Access Coalition. And so it's where we partner with, you know, we're St. Kate's, but then we also partner with other area campuses that are trying to address food insecurity, like we are trying to do here at St. Kate's. So we are an action team of that MFJN network. And I guess I find hope there because we're working locally with other organizations. We're putting BIPOC leaders at the center of this collaborative. So we're learning from each other. And we're writing grants collaboratively, which I think is a really big deal. And then we're just getting to know each other, and we're like hanging out and building relationships too. So I guess that's where I find hope and energy, is in these collaborations, because I feel like we can do more. So we're running gardens here. We have a food shelf here. It's just this little thing, but we're connected to this larger network in our area. And because of that, we can do more, and we can essentially we can just make our little sphere a little healthier through those connections. And I can see that, like, we're able to make St. Kate's a little healthier by creating a food resource and inviting others to help us do that, you know, inviting others to grow more food for each other. So it's just these little circles, but wherever your circle is, you can learn and do something. and then you can find out who else is doing it around you and join that circle and be a part of something bigger. So I find hope in that. And yeah, I just encourage everyone to check out Metro Food Justice Network just to see the good work that they're doing and that we're a part of doing here to model a healthier food system.
Jennifer, thank you very much for letting me put you on the spot.
Yeah, you bet.
Yay. Oh, round of applause on the room. Right. Fabulous. So we have about 9-10 minutes before class is over. How about some other comments or questions or things that people want to share either about this topic or about our session in general? Go ahead, Ann Shields.
I'm listening to a book that was recommended to me by a master composter who works at my community garden in New Mexico. And it's very detailed, and he tries to give a real balance history of two people, Norman Borlaug and William Vogt, and he calls the book The Wizard and the Prophet. And he's saying these are two schools of thought that went into creating the environmental movement today. One is to produce as much food as you can to feed the world. That's the Norman Borlaug story. And the other one is William Vogt, who kind of worked on conservation and trying, kind of more of the small, sustainable agriculture. I happen to be more with the prophet than the wizard, but it's really an interesting read, and it's got a lot of details on plant biology and whatever. It's very, it's I don't know, it's like a $19 or 19-hour book tape. It's called The Wizard.
Oh.
The Wizard and the Prophet. And it's written by, I don't look at the author's name. Charles Mann, Mann. And Charles Mann also wrote some books about about the European contact. He wrote a book called 1491 and 1493. So he's also a scholar about kind of what was happening in the pre-colonial America and post-colonial America with people and whatever. So he's kind of, I think, a little bit like a Howard Zinn or whatever, but he's telling maybe somebody else has read that book or heard of it, but I'm just, since we're recommending, this is like a book club. Therese, thank you for those titles, and really, this was really, really cool tonight. I enjoyed this so much, and thank you again, Jennifer, too.
Okay, thank you. I want to say just one thing too about another dimension of this. When a long time ago, I did some work in rural Arkansas where there were chicken farming operations that were a lot like what you described, Therese. The concentrated feeding, and
that's where
the
they
company
from the chicken.
Yeah. So this system was working there too. And at the time, which it sounds very familiar, there was a workers' rights and immigration angle to this as well. So so many people would come to work in these packing plants that required a lot of low skill, low wage labor. And then also in a climate of anti-immigration, we're afraid to leave their houses and afraid to do things like report workers' rights violations, which were happening all the time in these plants. And so what our job was as organizers in this area was to work with the different pastors of different congregations to make sure that when the workers came forward with their concerns, because sometimes the only place they felt safe enough to do this was at church, that they knew what to tell people about what their rights were, right? So we have this whole other dimension of immigration, and also what kind of obligations do we have to one another as communities of faith, to hold each other up in these moments of exploitation and people being taken advantage of for lots of different reasons. So that's just another angle that I want to add to this conversation.
Well, and I want to add the Native American view, because it was so cool years ago when Dream of Wild Health was introduced to all of us and their farm up there, and the fact that they have to go put those brown paper bags over every single stalk of corn, because when the Monsanto gentrified whatever that is in those, if that lands on a single one of their stalks of corn, they will be sued by Monsanto. And so Dream of Wild Health is an extraordinary place, and we all know the popularity of Owami as a restaurant, and now moving over into the Guthrie because of how popular that seasonal eating has become and from native land. And then the last thing I'll say is I was in Senegal, West Africa in May, and one day we were having a rest day, and I watched an Al Jazeera special about Monsanto basically calling all the shots with farming around the world.
Yeah.
And anytime a farmer in Spain or Portugal or anywhere does something that isn't aligned with what Monsanto wants them to do, they get sued internationally. And this thing was saying, we want to be able to have our own sovereignty here, but the courts that were hearing them kept letting Monsanto get away with it. So that's all I got. Does anybody want to like it?
Yeah. I know the Monsanto secret.
Okay.
Have you ever used Roundup on your garden?
Oh, yes.
I tried to get rid of some weeds. It never leaves you. It kills everything for years. They have figured out a way to put Roundup in the seed so that no weeds grow around those seeds. So of course they don't want to share that with anybody, but all the major seeds, corn, soybeans, everything is from Monsanto now because that's their secret. I didn't know that. Roundup is inside your seeds now. You don't have to put it in.
It's also inside your body.
Yeah.
And the seeds don't reproduce themselves. You have to buy seeds again next year.
Right.
You can save some and try. That's what they don't want.
Well, I don't think it works.
I mean, you can figure it out.
They're hybrid.
They're hybrids.
An interesting thing about Monsanto, well, Monsanto's now owned by Bayer, so it's a bigger conglomerate, but actually the top agricultural export from Hawaii is GMO seed, and it's because Bayer owns a number of acreage here, and they do GMO seed that they sell to the mainland and other parts of the world. So GMO seed, because it's a year-round growing season, a lot of it comes from Hawaii.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Well, folks, I think we could talk about these things for a long time, but I don't know. It's time for us to be
We could eat differently. We could start with that.
Let's do that. And I would love to end. I'm sorry, we have to go, but I wish we had time to end with like some Wendell Berry poetry or something. But that's another recommendation I can make for you is read the piece of Wild Things before you go to sleep tonight.
I challenge everyone?
Oh, Carol's got one last thing to say.
I want to challenge everyone to at least to tell our stories of how we've seen the change. You know, I'm a farm girl, and what changes I've seen around me. So I really encourage everyone to at least tell your story of the changes that you've noticed in your lifetime. I just think that's so important to share because I think we have to pay attention now of what's going on. We've started to see the results of all these things, and we have to pay attention.
Thank you, Carol. A great way to end. Let's, everybody, if you're feeling inspired, remember next week is project sharing. So thanks a lot.
I have a Wendell Berry poem.
Oh, you do? Okay.
When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Wendell Berry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thanks a lot, Bree and Therese and Jennifer and everybody who had additions to them.
Yeah.